Well, hello everyone. It's Dr. Rose here coming to you guys with an impromptu recording. I'm on Periscope and live on Facebook as well. But wanted to come to you guys and talk about something that's been in the news lately, kind of pop culture, if you guys follow any of that information. But it kind of relates to psychology, not kind of, it does. And as a psychologist, it's so important for me to just educate people on mental illness because there are a lot of things that go on in the world that we don't realize have a direct connection to possible mental illness that's going on. And so last few days I've been seeing a lot of postings. Hi, Odell Lucas, guys on Periscope there, and see Nathaniel Robinson has joined on Facebook as well. But there's been quite a few, just sharing of social media about the latest, I guess, episode, if you want to call it that, or ranting of Kanye West. Everybody knows Kanye West. I'm actually a fan of the guy, his older stuff. His music is on my playlist, my workout playlist. It really gets me there. But the latest episode talks about how he kind of lost it on the set of Saturday Night Live, and they were really concerned that he was not going to even go out and perform live this past weekend. And it talks about how they had to come in, even the top guy on Saturday Night Live, I forget his name escapes me, they had to pull Kim Kardashian out of the audience to come and kind of calm him down so he can get out there and perform. They say kind of went off on a rant, and we've all heard of this. If you've been on social media in the last few years, you have heard episodes where Kanye West has kind of what we call lost it. So I see a lot of posting today about him being crazy, or this dude is crazy, or cray and all these just really understandable but derogatory things to kind of describe his behavior. But as a psychologist, and I've been saying this for years, and it just fascinates me because I've never heard anyone in the mainstream media even address this when they talk about Kanye. But as a psychologist and someone who knows about head injury, had to study extensively about it to pass my state boards, and have treated patients over the years with all types of head injuries, be it traumatic brain injury, closed head injury, or what have you. When I see these things happening with Kanye, it immediately raises the flag with me that this guy is potentially suffering from, the effects of closed head injury. Now, those of you who have followed him throughout his career can remember that in 2002, he had a horrific car accident where his jaw was shattered, just really horrific. And he even recorded Through the Wire, one of his great hits, while his jaw was wired and recovering from that. And then someone recently, because I shared this immediately this morning when I saw more of the postings coming up about this behavior, and one of my friends on Facebook shared that he even talked about after his accident how he had short-term memory loss and what he described as deja vu moments about things that never happened to him. But one of the things that we do know as psychologists is that closed head injury is real. And what I'm seeing with Kanye is evidence of what we call frontal lobe syndrome. Okay, the frontal lobe is this part of the brain here. And this is the part of the brain that is involved with, social appropriate behavior. It's involved in problem solving, social interaction, all of those good things, personality. Now, I'm big on personality. When my clients come in, I give them quick personality inventories, and I always tell people when I go out and speak, the only two things that can change a person's personality is mental illness or head injury. And a head injury can be anything from a stroke to a blow to the head. But it's true, this could possibly explain a lot of the erratic behavior that we've seen over the years with Kanye West. I know a lot of people want to say, I think he's really suffering after his mom died. Now, I've lost my mom. Lots of people out there have lost people close to them, and we know that that can be very devastating. But this doesn't explain that. Very well, losses can exacerbate problems that you already have. But when you see these episodes continuing to happen that really go against social norms, you have to question, is this guy suffering from the effects of frontal lobe syndrome? Is it something that was even addressed or even being treated? Now, those of you who are old enough to remember, and I was a kid then, but I still remember, if you remember, and I see David McCullough, who works at the Neural Fitness Center, says Ronda Rousey is a similar boat. I didn't think about that, but I know Ronda Rousey just talked about on the Ellen Show this week how she contemplated suicide after losing that bout, you know, and you think about that, social appropriate behavior or erratic behavior, things of that sort. Thanks for sharing that, David. But those of you who can remember back in early 80s when the assassination attempt was made on Ronald Reagan, then President Ronald Reagan, you can remember one of his administration teams, Jim Brady, was actually shot in the head, and his damage was in the frontal lobe. And I can remember people really rejoicing when they made, even though he wasn't able to walk, he was in a wheelchair, but people were rejoicing because they said he made a full recovery. And one of the things that people with frontal lobe syndrome, they look just like you and me. Okay, they can function. I have patients like this. They get up, they can look good, they can dress well and everything, but that brain is damaged. That brain is damaged. And one of the reasons they thought Jim Brady was going to be able to return to the White House and work his job on administration, but he was never able to because it was reported he could not control his emotions. And this is a telltale sign of frontal lobe damage. The inability to manage emotions, the inability to just really show social appropriate behavior. I can remember studying for my license exam and really studying this whole idea of frontal lobe syndrome intensely, and a story being told about one of the top researchers in the country who suffered a head injury in a car accident. And he and his wife was at, they were at a ballet, you know, in New York. And he got up and left, and the wife could not find him anywhere. And she looked around in this great historic opera house, and she found her husband over urinating in a planted pot outside in the main area, you know, the foyer area of this opera house. Totally inappropriate behavior. But again, with frontal lobe syndrome, this is a telltale sign of it, you know. That's the function of the frontal lobe. It helps us. This area here in our brain helps us to understand what's socially appropriate, what's not socially appropriate, what to say, what not to say. So people with frontal lobe syndrome will say things that people like, are they nuts? You know, that's totally inappropriate, socially inappropriate. Problem solving becomes affected as well. Lots of clinical just behaviors that we look for, like the appropriateness of behavior. Their empathy towards others may not be present. And apathy, you know, do they care less about their interests, their hobbies, all these type of things. Even increased hypersexuality, you know, inappropriate sexuality and things of that sort has been reported with people with this frontal lobe damage. And I taught for over a decade as an adjunct professor in psychology. And I can remember a student of mine who was a straight A student. I mean, she was on scholarship. This kid was very sharp. And I can remember her having a car accident. She had a car accident, which was deemed minor. Now, this is something to keep in mind as well. A lot of times, you know, you're not going to see the damage. Like with Jim Brady, he had a bullet go through the brain. With Kanye West, the damage they thought was basically here where they had to reconstruct his face. But we know that that was an impact for it to shatter his jaw. So with this particular student, after her accident, her grades plummeted. She was cleared from the emergency room. They told her she was fine. Nothing showed up on CAT scans, you know, on the brain. But she could not focus. She could not complete her work. It's just like a total personality change with her, and she eventually had to drop out of college. But I remember before she left college, I really impressed onto her to go and see a neurologist and to not settle for people saying that that car accident did not cause any damage to her, because it was obvious that it did. And sometimes we have to be an advocate for ourselves when it comes to that. But as a psychologist, I have to be an advocate for mental illness. So, you know, when I see people posting things about the craziness of Kanye, yeah, his behavior is inappropriate, but we have to really give it some thought and consider, could it be something more going on here? Could it be that this guy is still suffering from the effects of frontal lobe damage from many years ago? And I will tell you this, with a lot of that damage, there is a level of what am I trying to say, recovery that happens. So it's possible that it cannot be much recovery left, but what happens with patients of mine who suffer from this is I help them to learn to manage better, give them tools that they can use to help manage their emotions better, because the damage is done. The damage is done. So I just want to encourage you guys to really be aware of that before we're so quick to jump on calling people crazy or just, saying, oh, he's a genius and this is how geniuses act or what have you. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of people you may know, that's suffering from some head injuries that were never diagnosed. Even research is showing that a large population, I want you guys to pay attention to this, a large population or percentage of our prison population, they're finding actually had undiagnosed head injuries, which can explain a lot of the acts that landed them in prison, So let's just keep that in mind before we're quick to jump to calling people crazy or, cray-cray, or this is effects of his genius. There's a lot of geniuses out there that don't necessarily exhibit this inappropriate behavior, and just educate ourselves a little bit more on what this whole ideal of frontal lobe damage can do to a person, because it's so important for us to just really have an awareness of mental illness and really stop trivializing the effect that it has on everyday life for people. So this was me with my 2 cents today. Just wanted to take some time in between patients to come live and talk to you guys about this, because I put it up on Facebook earlier today and it garnered a lot of conversation, and I see several people shared it as well, and that garnered a lot of conversation from people as well. So hopefully this shines a light on you guys. Go ahead and Google it. Frontal lobe damage, frontal lobe syndrome. Our brain is very delicate. My kids know all through the years, since this is the area that I studied where the brains, I've just been on them forever about just how sensitive, the brain is. And if you suspect somebody in your life, if you suspect someone in your family or your friends or in your life who you've noticed a change in behavior since maybe some accident that was deemed not a big deal, encourage them to go get it checked out, because there are tools we can do to help a person and to prevent some of the outbursts that we see with Kanye West, or prevent some of the behaviors that we see that land people ultimately in prison. So you guys have a great day. Hopefully this shines some light on this subject. Mental illness is my line of business, and I just want people to just be more aware of how it affects our everyday life. You guys have a good day. Bye-bye.